Hey, it's Em, here to talk about A Haunting on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand. I keep going, like, in my mind, I'm like, how do I even want to approach this review? Because there's a lot of different facets to it. I'll start by saying I found the book at the library. The title immediately evoked The Haunting of Hill House. I assumed it was tangentially related or was at least going for that vibe. It wasn't until I had already started reading that I learned it is an authorized sequel to The Haunting of Hill House. And I do think that influenced my feelings about it going forward. So that's something to keep into account and keep in mind. And I will talk a little bit about that later. We're going to talk a little bit about The Haunting of Hill House and, obviously A Haunting on the Hill, so there may be spoilers. If you want to read either of those and haven't, and you don't want spoilers for plot points, you might want to click off now and come back later. Let me start by saying I love The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. It was published in 1959. I didn't read it until much later. I saw the movie The Haunting first, and that intrigued me to read the novella. To the point, I want to show you my cup of stars. I don't know if you can really get a good sense of it from the camera, but we were in Paris in 2018, and we went to a little Asian shop. It had stuff from Japan, I think, mostly. And I saw this, and I immediately thought of the cup of stars from The Haunting of Hill House. And if you know, you know. And I had to have it. I don't drink out of it. It sits on a shelf above my writing space. It's my little reminder, and it just spoke to me. And so I do have an attachment to The Haunting of Hill House. I saw the remake movie from way back when. I think it had Owen Wilson and maybe Catherine Zeta-Jones in it. I tried to watch the Netflix mini-series thing, but didn't care for it. I think I dropped out after just a couple of episodes of that. So that gives you maybe some of my biases towards the book and the material. The Haunting of Hill House is set at Hill House, a house built by a man named Henry Crane. Let's see, it was published in 1959. The house had stood for 80 years, so the house had been built in the mid to late 1800s. And it was and it might stand for 80 more. And then in the time period of the story, 4 people come to Hill House to study its supernatural qualities. It's haunted, ostensibly. There is the group is led by Dr. Montague, who wants to study the house. He invites Eleanor, who is more or less the central character. She has a history. She's 20-something. She's young, but she's been caring for an ailing mother, and she has had since childhood some kind of poltergeist activities associated with her, attached to her. So Dr. Montague invites her to Hill House. Also, Theodora. She's also a woman with psychic sensitivities, ostensibly. And then Luke is the heir to Hill House, and he's there. So 4 of them in a haunted house, creepy things happening. And the wonderful thing about The Haunting of Hill House, as written by Shirley Jackson, is that it's very ambiguous. It's very much are these things happening? Is Eleanor, is she just slowly kind of losing her grip on reality? is she actually like the center of the phenomena and like needs to leave because the house is using her as some kind of amplifier? Like, but it's spooky because you're not quite sure and you kind of are. Anyway, it's well written. All of the characters, even if you don't like them, you're kind of engaged with them and their sensibilities. You're definitely sympathetic to Nell, or most readers would be. Her background, her rough childhood, and current life where her sister is happily married and leaves her to take care of their ailing mother alone. So it's a really good novella. I know it's not for everyone. Some people think it's boring. Maybe for the modern time and sensibilities it is, but I really like it. And so I picked up A Haunting on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand, and I started reading it. The first few chapters are first person by the character Holly. There are 4 central characters in this book, the same as in The Haunting of Hill House. And Holly is a struggling playwright who has taken a teaching job, even though that's not what she wants to be doing. But she gets a grant to develop this new kind of play. It's a play based on somebody else's play from 1600s, 1700s. It's based on the real life, execution of a woman who was accused of witchcraft, and yet Holly's going to give the character a happy ending, or a happier ending, I guess. Fine. Suddenly, jarringly, we start having chapters from the other characters' points of view, not first person. Only Holly's chapters are first person. The other chapters are third person, limited. So, Holly has a girlfriend named Nisa. I'm going to call her Nisa because her name is spelled like Lisa, but with an N instead of an L. So I'm making that decision because for a while I was like, is it Nissa? But I feel like Nissa would have 2 S's, so I don't know. But I'm going to say Nisa. Nisa is a singer, and we're told every single time Nisa is on page, which is a lot, what a wonderful singer she is, how incredible she is. She's amazing, right? She's just got this incredible voice and this presence and blah, blah, blah. Nisa is with Holly to help develop the play because she's doing songs, murder ballads, for the play. Nisa's the only person of color in the book, and also very ambitious, very there's a lot of self-centeredness involved. I was she's kind of like Theo because she's also very promiscuous, sensual and all this stuff. There's an amount of exotification around her, I want to say, that I don't know how I felt about that. There is Stevie, who is their bisexual friend who's going to do audio, sound design, but he's also going to play the demon/dog character. So it's the witch, whose name is Elizabeth, gets together with this demon dog named Thomason, who Stevie's gonna play. And he has anxiety, he has trigger warnings for child sexual abuse, things like that going on in his past. So he has issues. Holly has issues because she had a really good play, but then got accused of telling someone else's story. A girl named, I want to say Macy Lee, if I'm remembering right, who was, it turned out, maybe had mental issues, and had told Holly this story one night when they had a hookup, and then Holly took that story and turned it into a play and got accused of plagiarizing, or something. And so we get that kind of story. We get everybody's background. We don't actually get a lot of Nisa's background, aside from the fact that I think her dad was Jamaican or something. We don't hear a whole lot about her childhood, but then we also have Amanda Greer. She's like this 60-something actress trying to come back. She has a background where, like in her, like some years ago, she was going to be doing a play, and her co-star during rehearsals fell off of a high catwalk platform type thing. He fell and died, and of course the play never happened. And now all anybody ever thinks about when they hear Amanda Greer's name is, oh yeah, didn't she kill that guy? Because some people are like, did she push him? That kind of thing. So everybody's got these histories. But Holly gets this grant to go do the play, and she decides to rent Hill House for a couple of weeks and bring Amanda, Stevie, and Nisa with her there to, read it through and work on it and things like that. What could go wrong? The woman who currently owns Hill House, Ainsley, she shows some reluctance to rent it, but she needs the money. The couple who come to cook and clean for them, kind of like the Dudleys, yeah, in The Haunting of Hill House. They won't stay after dark, or whatever. They tell them, you guys shouldn't stay here, you guys should leave. But they also need the money, and they're also kind of, angry about needing the money, and at the same time not wanting these people to not be there because they honestly think it's not safe. There's a woman who lives in like a mobile home type thing down the road, Evadne. She also like tries to warn them away. It turns out Ainsley, Evadne, and Melissa, the wife of the couple who come to cook and clean, all have these silver rings with amber stones, and it turns out they're all connected, and they may actually be witches. And then there's this stuff with like black hairs, like the rabbits, right? Hair, like being around, and weird things happening with them. And there's a lot of like, here's the thing about this book, there's a lot of little stuff, but it never seems to add up to anything big. The nursery at Hill House, which in the original story is also like a focal point for the bizarre phenomena, like it makes a big appearance here, but at the same time none of it feels impactful. And because it's so scattered, and because it doesn't seem to build, it just seems to be bits and bobs, I kept waiting for more or something bigger or something more interesting. And because the characters themselves are not actually that interesting, you're getting a lot of their thoughts. You see how the house begins to kind of divide them because they start kind of thinking bad things about each other or suspecting one another and getting weird. And then also just the supernatural element is like not ambiguous here. There's definitely just like weird stuff going on that, it's not like, oh, is this all in their heads or whatever? It's like, no. And spoiler, by the end of it, Nisa has disappeared, and maybe dead. And it's like, okay. I don't know how I feel about that being like the one person of color, and then they are the one who, ends up sacrificed to the house, or, it's all just kind of, there's stories about a family that lived there in the 80s and a boy who ate bad mushrooms, and then they find a baggie of old mushrooms in a linen closet and a magazine with all of the faces cut out of it. But that's just, again, another storyline that goes nowhere. Holly sees, like, what she thinks is Macy Lee in the woods spinning. And, like, again, that goes nowhere. It's just all a bunch of, it's like the Winchester Mystery House. It's a bunch of stairways to nowhere. And I mean, I guess the other thing too is when supernatural stuff was being described, I did not understand. I couldn't picture it. I couldn't feel it. So I feel like if you're writing something like that, it needs to be, I don't know, better described. I realize it's hard to write supernatural stuff in a way that feels and seems and senses certain ways, but like, I don't know, it didn't work for me. And obviously this is all my opinion, but I'm also just like, okay, if they're authorizing like sequels to The Haunting of Hill House, are we building a Hill House universe? Because I just don't, thumbs down, like, no, like, not everything needs to be a universe. And that's like taking a beautiful, perfect, flawless diamond and setting it in an ugly piece of jewelry and surrounding it with cruddy, other jewels that aren't nearly as, like, leave The Haunting of Hill House alone. It is perfect as it is. We do not need, a whole built-out universe, story of this house kind of thing. We just don't. Not everything should be up for grabs, and it just kind of irritates me that that's what this feels like. Like, oh yeah, and maybe somebody's gonna go write the 80s story now, and I don't know, maybe that Netflix series was authorized in some way. I have no idea, but like, I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. Originally, I was going to say 3.5, maybe even round it to 4. But the longer it went on with so little actually happening. And here's where we get to the part where, like, if this had been a book on its own, where it evoked Hill House, The Haunting of Hill House, but it wasn't supposed to be directly tied to The Haunting of Hill House, I might feel differently. I might be like, yeah, this was okay for this kind of book. But then when I discovered, no, this is supposed to be like a sequel, and like, then obviously the measuring stick changes a little bit because I have a higher expectation for something that's supposed to go with The Haunting of Hill House. And I think that actually worked against this book for me. But anyway, at the end of the day, I did end up giving it 3 stars on Goodreads. The more I think about it, it's probably more like a 2.5, but I'll leave it at 3 because it was fine, but only fine. And like, it could have been much better. It could have been much more intriguing. It could have been much more like, I don't know, it just could have had more. And I mean, I've never read anything by this author before. Her bio makes her sound like some kind of big deal, I guess, but I just is like, it just, it was fine. It's not terribly long. I think there's only about 322 pages of actual story. I think it's listed as at like 336 pages, but that includes front and back matter, which I don't count when I'm keeping count of pages that I read. So mine says 322. But, it was a disappointment for me, I guess, when I realized it was supposed to be like a companion piece to The Haunting of Hill House. I would have been less disappointed if it had just been like its own thing that was meant to be kind of like The Haunting of Hill House. I do think, there's a difference. And, whether that should be true or not, that's how I feel about it. Just the characters were not super interesting or intriguing or sympathetic. Like, yeah. And then, like I said, like, oh, and that was the other thing. They kept talking about the hairs, the black hairs being fetches. And I'm like, for what? Okay, because a fetch in witchcraft is a doppelganger, usually of a person that you you see this kind of projection of the person, like as they're dying or shortly before they die. You know, like if you have a friend who lives far away and you're, you know, downtown and you think you see them kind of just standing on a street corner and you're like, dude, what are you doing in town or whatever? But then you get a phone call and you find out that they just passed away in a car accident. That's a fetch. Sometimes the fetch might mouth words, like try to get a message to you or something. But I'm like, so is there a black hair projecting itself somewhere? But then, like, in this version, I think the hairs were versions of Melissa Ainsley and Evadne, and I was like, well, then they turning themselves into rabbits and projecting themselves, or projecting a version of themselves as a hair. Like, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I'm just like, and maybe the point is that's like very complex magic. That's not just something easy, and it's not just like a subconscious kind of projection throwaway thing. But it was weird. It was weird because they kept calling them fetches, and I was like, I don't know if that's what you mean, but that's an aside. That's a quibble. Anyway, yeah, overall, I gave it 3 stars. Like I said, you know, take it as you will, knowing all of my biases. I wouldn't say don't read it, but I do think it was a little boring and a little disappointing overall. And that's it. That was quite the ramble. But if you've read it, let me know what you think. If you've read Haunting of Hill House, let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. And I am going to finish The Empress of Time. That should be the next book I have ready for review. And until next time, take care.